Hi, everyone. Like Jacqueline mentioned, we're going to be walking through our most recent announcement, which is the inclusion of app governance in Defender for Cloud Apps and how we're really taking XDR for SaaS apps to the next level. So this will include a new features overview as well. My name is Caroline Lee, and I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager focusing on Defender for Cloud Apps and app governance. Wendy, Greg, do you guys want to introduce yourselves really quick? Maybe Wendy, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. I'm Wendy. I'm a product manager on app governance.
Greg?
Hey guys, I'm Greg Wiselka. I'm from Customer Experience Engineering team and I'm PM.
Fabulous. All right. So quick agenda for today. We're just going to do a run through of what SaaS security means at Microsoft. We'll do a recap of the RSA news. We'll talk about what the opt-in experience looks like for AppG and what to expect tomorrow. And then we'll go through a demo of the key features of app governance as well as the Microsoft 365 Defender integration. And we'll have time for a Q&A at the end, but feel free to ask questions. There's no dumb questions here. We want this session to be interactive and for you all to get the most that you can out of this session. All right, so let's first start out with SaaS security at Microsoft. So what exactly does this mean? So back in February, we announced how we're shifting from a CASB to a holistic SaaS security offering. And what makes Defender for Cloud Apps a SaaS security solution is the inclusion of a couple of new pillars, which we'll walk through today, but we're still staying true to our roots of a CASB and also continuing to invest in those capabilities. So starting at the top with discovery, this doesn't change. We're still, investing in discovering all of the SaaS applications in your environment, helping you to determine which ones are safe for corporate use, which ones you may want to block from users from using because they pose a risk to your app, to your environment. And you'll see that we've put the sanctioned applications at the center of this diagram. And this is because SaaS apps are really becoming assets to organizations. They house the most sensitive information, and if they were compromised, it could be extremely detrimental to an organization. So starting on the right-hand side with SaaS Security Posture Management, aka SSPM, this is one of the newer pillars that comprise our SaaS security offering. And what this really is surfacing the misconfigurations we see within SaaS applications and providing recommendations on how to remediate those. So we announced in February ServiceNow, Salesforce, Microsoft 365, I believe Okta as well. And we had a couple more come out this past March. So we're really investing in this area to make sure that you have strong posture within your environment. One thing I'll also mention is that this is built directly into Microsoft Secure Score. So not only do you get a view into posture across your applications, but also the rest of your workloads in your environment. Moving on to the bottom right, we have information protection. Again, a fundamental CASB area that we're still investing in, where we are protecting all of the data within those SaaS applications. So not only providing visibility into the data exposure, but enabling you to configure policies, whether if it's in near real time or real time, such as removing a publicly accessible file or removing an external collaborator who shouldn't be accessing a sensitive file, or maybe putting in policies to block downloads in real time to unmanaged devices. Next up, we have continuous threat protection. So in October, or this past October, we announced how we were converging over to Microsoft 365 Defender, our XDR offering. And we recently went GA this past April. And this has really amped up the threat protection, not only for SaaS apps, but enabling customers to have a holistic view into all of their alerts across each workloads in endpoint, identity, email and collaboration, and now SaaS apps. And you're able to create advanced hunting queries, custom detections, and all of that goodness an XDR platform has to offer. And then lastly, app-to-app protection. Again, a newer pillar that comprises our SaaS security offering. And this is truly done through app governance and where our focus is going to be today. So the same way that a user can interact with apps, whether if it's, accessing an application or viewing a file in an app or downloading some sort of data, that same principle applies to a third-party application accessing another app, whether if that's an OAuth application that has permissions or privileges. App governance is really a unique offering in the Microsoft ecosystem that covers this scenario. And we're going to get into all of that today. All right. So let's do a quick RSA News recap. So again, just to reiterate, AppG is our security and policy management capability specifically designed for OAuth-enabled applications in AAD. It provides visibility into app behavior, insights, permissions, data usage, and a ton of other capabilities. And what we've seen in the last couple of months is a significant rise in app-based attacks, whether if that's through OAuth app abuse, or you may have seen the business email compromise scenario or consent phishing. It's obvious that this is becoming a more prominent attack vector, and organizations need a way to cover this scenario. And we recognize that customers don't want to pay a premium price tag to get these capabilities. It should be built into their existing security offerings, not only to save, financial, but also personal resources as well. Which is why, starting tomorrow, new and existing Defender for Cloud Apps customers will be able to opt into app governance and start using all of these phenomenal capabilities at no additional cost. If you missed this announcement, this blog is up on Tech Community. We'll provide all of the links at the end of this video, but that really gives you an in-depth view on why we're choosing to include it and other capabilities we announced at Secure. And then lastly, any customer who has the full Defender for Cloud Apps license will be eligible to opt into AppG. So whether if that's E5 security, E5 compliance, you guys are all eligible to get access to these capabilities. Before I move on, are there any questions, maybe ones in the chat that weren't answered yet? I'm just going to quickly check here. Perfect. I think we're good. Okay, and with that, Greg, I will pass it to you to talk about the opt-in experience.
Thank you, Caroline. So from tomorrow, as Caroline mentioned, tomorrow, the 1st of June, we'll start presenting you with an opt-in experience. So this means that if you want to enable app governance, you will need to go under Microsoft 365 Defender settings, Cloud Apps. If you scroll down to App Governance and the service status and enable Use App Governance toggle bar, you'll be able to enable app governance. If you are using app governance under the trial license, you will still need to be required to enable the toggle. So please do so as soon as possible once it's available in your tenant. We will be closely monitoring the interest in order to provide you with the best experience and make sure that the service is not overwhelmed. We might introduce a waitlist at some point. It's where the customers will be able to submit the enable app governance request, and we'll process them as soon as possible. This will be clearly described in the portal as well. And if your tenant is in unsupported region, we will also present you with the waitlist option from tomorrow. And this is to understand the demand and your interest. If there is any questions around this, please let us know in the chat window, and we'll answer them as we go. And I can hand over to Wendy.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
So I'll be reviewing some key features we have released recently. We've increased our integration with Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps a lot, and other Microsoft 365 products as well. And we've also released additional policies and detections to make admins and SOC analysts' lives easier. So let me dive into the first one. We'll stay on this slide for now. The first feature release is OAuth convergence, and this will be available to all customers by June 1st, which is tomorrow. So for customers who had both an Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps and App Governance license, previously one of the key confusions that we'd heard was that both App Governance and Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps supported OAuth apps, but each had their own unique features and pages. For example, Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps OAuth app features are primarily based on app metadata, whereas for App Governance, we have deep integration with each workload, and we ingest data from different sources, in addition to the app metadata piece. So an example is like that some insights are missing from others, from one and not in the other, such as like delegated or app-only permissions. And also customers were able to create OAuth policies in App Governance and Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps with different predicates. So we solved these issues by converging the OAuth app management experiences within App Governance. So if we go to the next slide, you can see here when you go to the OAuth apps node on the left nav, it will now direct you to App Governance instead, because we've converged the OAuth app experience within the App Governance node. And I'm going to take over the sharing to do a demo. So you can see that now within App Governance, admins can now view and manage all Azure AD OAuth apps. So I'll go to this tab, and this includes all OAuth apps that are registered within Azure AD. And then the new tabs as part of the OAuth convergence includes the Google tab as well as the Salesforce tab. And this includes all of the respective OAuth apps on those platforms. And now, regardless of whether the apps have accessed Microsoft 365 resources, the apps will show up within App Governance. Also, admins can create and view all policies directly in App Governance. So there's a tab for Azure AD apps, and you can manage and create policies from this tab, or you can go to other policies and manage and create policies for Salesforce apps, Google apps, and others. We also recently released new predefined policies and threat detections. So we go back here. I'm just going to filter by predefined policies. And you'll see that we recently released a predefined policy for access to sensitive data, which comes out of the box for all App Governance customers. You don't have to set it up. And it alerts on if any app has accessed any data with a sensitivity label, such as confidential, highly confidential, or even a general sensitivity label. And like other predefined policies, you can modify the scope, conditions, and the remediation action. Or you can disable the policy altogether if it doesn't suit your tenant. Additionally, this policy is integrated with SecureScore, which you can navigate to in the Defender portal as well. And you can see in our apps list view more information on sensitive data accessed by an app. And I'll just quickly show you what that is. So you can see here any sensitivity labels accessed by this app, and you can search.
Hey, Wendy, before you move on, do you mind zooming in a little bit? We just got a request. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. Okay. If that's not close enough, let me know and I can change that. So I wanted to move on to threat detections as well. So we released threat detections. Our threat detections come out of the box, but are not visible in this list like other policies because they're proprietary and you're not able to edit them like other policies. But if any of your apps trigger our threat detections, an alert will appear in your alerts queue, just like any other alert or incident. So we are releasing new threat detections based on attack patterns we've seen in the wild all the time. In the past couple months, we released 5 new threat detections. I'll just speak through them quickly, but you can read more about all of our threat detections in our documentation. So we released a threat detection for recently created multi-tenant apps that enumerate users' information frequently, suspicious apps with mail permissions sending numerous emails, new app with mail permissions and low consent rate, new app with low consent rate accessing numerous emails, and app that's associated with a typo squatted domain, meaning like a app that has a name that is misspelled but looks like another domain that's more reputable, such as like Microsoft or something like that. And again, you can read more about our threat detections in our documentation, which you can get to here.
Wendy, we're getting a ton of really good questions, so I hope you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. So Raju asked, are there any other IDPs other than Azure AD that are supported now, or is this something that's on our roadmap?
We don't currently support other IDPs at the moment. Would love to hear more feedback on that, and maybe we can have an offline conversation on that, kind of the requirements there and what you'd like to see for that, because it's definitely something like it would love to learn more about.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendy.
Are there other questions or?
There was one around in the overview of apps, so that we were listed at 1,969, and someone asked if that's a bug in the overview view.
Which part? 1,000.
Maybe it was an anonymous question, so maybe I'll just ask that person to clarify, and then I'll get back to you, Wendy, if they end up sharing more.
Sure, sounds good.
Cool.
Okay. I will jump into the last feature we're releasing, and I'll jump to the Azure AD portal or page. So the last feature we're releasing is custom queries within Advanced Hunting to get a double click into data usage. As I mentioned before, we're continuing to increase our integration with the Microsoft 365 product suite to provide a richer experience for our customers, specifically admins and SOC analysts. So what do I mean by that? Let's take a look. So I'm going to choose an app that has a lot of data usage. And you can see in the data usage tab a trend in the data usage, but here you'll get a deeper look into what the data usage is per workload. And as an admin, what I might want to drill into is if there's a lot of data usage, let's just say, yeah, there's a lot of channel message, traffic, or data usage for this app. And I'm curious, what are the channel messages? What is being sent? What is being read? I can actually click into find related activities and hunting. And this will take me to advanced hunting with a custom query provided, and I can just run that query to see detailed information on all of that data usage for channel messages. So you can see here, like, it provides details like timestamp, account ID, and display name, what type of resource type is being accessed, and the action type. You can even see like the channel GUID, so you know which channel is being accessed, which team it's for. And then if you click into it, you can get even more data, like what user is sending those messages, etc. And then for other data usage, I'll just click into another one. You can also see data on things like IP address, like the data changes based on the workload, right? Because there are different details. So I'll just show you another example. But you can see like IP address for OneDrive file access, file names, file extension, file size, etc. So it really gives you that double click, which is a request that we were hearing a lot from our customers when they're looking at this pane of what exactly is being accessed. So we created the custom queries for that. And yeah, so that's our increased integration with advanced hunting. That's the last feature that we've released recently. I'll pause there for any questions before I hand it back to Caroline.
Maybe just so we can have it on the recording, Wendy, does app governance only show OAuth app data?
It does. It does right now. Yep, just OAuth apps. So OAuth apps that are integrated with Azure AD, Google, or Salesforce.
Awesome. Let me see. The rest of these, I think, are okay. Where it shows all the malicious files. Don't know if I understand that question. I think we can keep going, Wendy.
Okay, I will hand it back to you then.
Okay, great. I'm gonna
share. Yeah.
take over. Okay. And then let me know if my screen is popping back up because my computer is a little bit slow. Should be on the Q&A slide now.
Yep, I can see it.
Awesome. I mean, we do have a number of questions, but maybe if folks feel comfortable, now I just checked. Is there any way to export the data that we saw in each of those views into a CSV file?
Yeah, so in the Azure AD, maybe I can share my screen again. Actually.
Yeah, awesome.
So we're back in the Azure AD page. There's an export button right here. And it exports all of the columns that are here. So you can see.
Great.
It has, oh, whoops, sorry. Excel, okay. Yeah, it shows you all of the columns that were exposed in the apps list. And then if you change the columns that are within the apps list, it will also change the columns that are shown in the CSV. And what I mean by that is changing these columns.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendy. Oh, we got Some great questions. Can we show policy tips in these apps? For example, tell a user that they're trying to upload sensitive information.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Maybe Yash, if you feel comfortable coming off mute, just to explain a little bit more on your question. If not, feel free to reply back there and add a little bit more clarity.
Does it mean like if a user is trying to upload a sensitive file somewhere, that a pop-up or something that would come up for them?
Yeah, maybe like a notification of some sort.
So that
Telling
would
them
be
they
more
can't.
on the DLP side.
Mhm.
And I believe that, and Greg or Caroline, keep me honest, I believe that
Yeah.
MDA does have some sort of capability to have a notification or a pop-up or something for users when they are trying to upload sensitive info.
Yeah, that's correct. So if that's the scenario, then we would recommend you using the conditional access app control feature within Defender for Cloud Apps. And that is based off of the Azure AD conditional access capabilities, where you would be able to set a policy in AAD based on set of conditions, whether if it's an unmanaged device or a specific application or a specific group, and then send them to Defender for Cloud Apps to take actions on that, whether if that's blocking them from downloading information or blocking them from uploading information. So that would cover that scenario if that's what you were talking about, Yash. And we'll send you the documentation to that so you can read more. You mentioned OAuth apps will be merged with app governance. Does that mean the OAuth apps page will be removed?
So currently the OAuth page is, as you can see, like kind of a placeholder that leads you to app governance. So at some point we will remove that, but for the time being, it will just look like this.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. You mentioned that if we opt in, that we would not be able to access OAuth grants via the OAuth apps menu. Will we still be able to manage OAuth apps using Microsoft 365 Defender or Azure AD if we do not opt in? Oh, I see. So if they don't opt in, Wendy, then would they see the original OAuth apps page here in the view that we have?
Yeah,
Got
they
it.
would.
Okay.
It's actually a great call out, and I think I wasn't super clear about that. So if you opt into app governance, the app governance node would show up like this, and it would look exactly like we just went through. But if you don't opt into app governance, obviously the node wouldn't show up for you here, and the OAuth apps page would look like it has looked like previously, and you'd be able to see your Salesforce and Google apps and your typical OAuth experience within Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps.
Perfect. Thank you, Wendy. Can we whitelist or block apps from the page itself? So similar to in Discovery, where we can sanction and unsanction applications, do we have a similar concept that applies in app governance?
Yeah, so within app governance, you can disable or enable an app, and you can do that right here. And this prevents the app from generating a token. So it basically wouldn't be able to take login or take any sort of action, even on the app only side. So it's not just restricted to user tokens, it's also app tokens. And you can see, like, for example, this app was disabled by a user, and it tells you who it's disabled by, like whether it's disabled by policy, a user, or disabled by Microsoft, which happens if the app is determined to be malicious and it's shut down globally.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendy. That was a great question, by the way. Will that, so going back or is there any report that will show the actual API permissions the OAuth app has?
So you can see the permissions an app has in this blade, this layout blade, and it shows you which Graph API permissions it has, as well as legacy API, which I don't have an example right now. Let me see if I have. So as you saw before, it shows you Graph API permissions and whether they're in use or not, and whether it's delegated or app level. We also show non-Graph API permissions that are like quote unquote legacy permissions, such as Office 365 Exchange Online. And then we show information like whether it's app level or delegated level permission. We don't have information on whether it's in use or not because it's an older API and we just don't get that data, but you can still see those permissions here as well.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. Let me see. Is it possible to control access to apps not supported in the list? Example, allow access to any webmail service globally, but only for read access and block any file uploads to the service to prevent data being sent out through an unauthorized method.
So restating it back, so the question is whether we can control other apps other than OAuth and do a sort of preemptive block if it's trying to send data like mail.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so there's two components, right? There's non-OAuth and then preemptive block.
I don't think non-OAuth actually is the component here. Is it possible to control access to apps not supported in the list? So maybe let's just focus on OAuth and if we could do a preemptive block for uploads to, uploads to the service to prevent data being sent out through an unauthorized method.
So I think this is a bit similar to the other question about conditional access that we talked about. So we're walking through the OAuth apps experience within app governance. And so in this scenario, the supported list is OAuth apps. So for OAuth apps, you can disable, enable them, and control them in that way. But in Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, which is a bit broader, which covers all cloud apps, you can sanction or unsanction those apps all up. So it wouldn't, so that's kind of like an all up level, and then kind of deeper, which Caroline, you covered before, the conditional access policies provides a little bit more granular and proactive way of blocking, which is based on levers such as like files and permissions used.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendy. Do these apps come up in the Shadow IT report? Maybe it would be good for us to talk about like the source of where we're surfacing these apps from. So Wendy, maybe you can just clarify like how we get visibility into the OAuth applications and where they come from. And then we can also talk about where the apps in Shadow IT come from, just to make that distinction.
Sure. So within app governance, the apps that we get are from the Azure AD identity provider. And so we cover all of the OAuth apps that are registered within Azure AD, plus those that are in Google and Salesforce. And so the source for that information is from AD as well as Graph APIs and other sources, like we consume data from other security products within Microsoft as well. And then Google and Salesforce, we get that information from those providers directly. Whereas within the Shadow IT report, maybe Caroline, you can provide
I can take this
on
one.
that one.
Yeah, so this is going to be provided either through, if you're leveraging the Defender for Endpoint integration, we'll send that traffic directly to Defender for Cloud Apps to see what apps are being accessed via endpoint. It could come from if you're using one of our secure web gateway integrations, or if you're kind of bringing your own proxy. So you could set up a log collector to collect that traffic on whatever proxy you're using, whether if it's Bluecoat, Cisco, Force, whatever you're using today. That's how we collect the traffic and those applications in the discovery portion. So it's at the network level. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, this is just a piece of feedback. It would be good to have the API access in the CSV export. Checking on the app level can be done via Azure. However, this export would greatly help to document the permissions. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay. Let's see. Is there any option to see which scope, for example, mail.read is used or not if there are multiple API permissions? Which scope, for example, mail.read is used or not if there are multiple API permissions? I'm not sure if I understand this one. Thanks.
Yeah, so the way that I'm reading this question is, can you see if there are multiple API permissions, can you see which are in use and which are not in use? Yeah, so there's a table that shows whether each permission is in use or not. And then you can see like all of these are not in use. And then we cover specific workloads. As you could see, I just want to scroll really quick. As you could see here, we cover the Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams workloads. And so the ones where you see not available, that's because of those are the workloads that we don't currently cover. But for the ones that we do cover, you can see whether they're in use or not.
Great, thank you, Wendy. These are awesome questions. We have so many more, actually. Can you elaborate on the sensitivities label, please, for the SaaS app context menu?
Yeah, so sensitivity labels.
Or maybe, Andrew, not to put you on the spot, do you want to share more on what the sensitivity labels component is and the blog that we had out? Is Wiz still with us?
Yeah, happy to share any information. What kind of information do you want me to talk about on the sensitivity label side?
Maybe just what we're seeing here and what this means and why it's important. Just a little bit more explanation on it.
Sure. So as Wendy mentioned, the core of this feature is talking about if an app is accessing sensitive content, right? Through all the capabilities that Microsoft offers, you're able to control if a user is accessing sensitive content. But one blind side for a lot of admins is when you don't know that there could be an app out there, one of your OAuth apps, that is also accessing your sensitive content. Imagine that you have a secret document, some confidential document that includes all of your financial information, and you just want specific users in the company to have access to, right? So the integration that we have done is that all the MIP labels that you have in your organization, we will list them here, and then we will show if there are specific application that is accessing those sensitive contents.
So MIP labels are also called DLP labels, in case you call them that in your organization. And also the labels themselves are not assigned within app governance. They're assigned through the DLP product. And so you would assign, like it's a whole separate process where you assign different files sensitivity levels, and like you label them general or confidential or whatever your organization chooses, and then they flow through to app governance, which we show which of those labels are being accessed by an app. Just to add to what you said, Andrew. Yeah.
And we are adding another capability very soon that you can even access this through App Hunt, so you can get all the details of what you don't see here, like which confidential app on what service, etc., would all be available soon.
Great. Thank you, Andrew and Wendy.
Of course.
We have a couple more questions. Maybe we can just talk about what the privilege levels mean. Like, how do we determine low, medium, high using app governance?
For permissions or
privileges. Mm-hmm.
Permissions, yeah. So the way that we determine whether a permission is low or high is actually based on, let me just double check. Yeah, it's actually based on a categorization that the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps team does for each permission based on their own analysis and our internal risk grading standards to determine whether a permission is low or high at a general level. It doesn't take into account like mailbox restrictions or things like that, but it is based on our internal grading standards.
Awesome. Okay, I think we have a couple more. What level of access is required to opt in into app governance? So maybe what roles are needed, or I guess like what admin level you would need to opt in.
Greg or Andrew, do you want to take this one?
I can take this question. So Caroline, the question is, what kind of an admin level is able to access this?
Is able to enable the toggle, yeah.
Okay, so there are certain admin roles that would be able to enable it. We have all of that in our online documentation, and we will share the link shortly.
Just looking at a couple more here. Answered a ton already. Can we show the Salesforce tab very quickly, Wendy? If there's anything in there, I know it's a demo tenant.
Yep. So in Salesforce, we just have 2 apps, but you can see things like the name, who it was authorized by. You can link to activity log. You can sanction, unsanction the app. And then take other actions like revoking, reporting, or notifying. And then you can see additional information. You can also create a policy from search criteria, like however you want to search. You do that, you can create a new policy from this search. I'm not sure if there's anything specific that you wanted to see, but kind of a general overview.
Yeah, they didn't specify anything. I think they were just interested in what the view looked like. So thank you, Wendy. Can we find apps that have a certificate or secret? Actually, sorry, I'm not sure if I understand that question. Let's move to this one. Can you share the onboarding guide for app governance? It seems pretty much most of the capabilities are the same as before with a couple new features.
So they're asking for like a how to get started kind of thing.
Yeah, and maybe I would be on the lookout for a blog that's going to come out very, very soon. But Wendy, maybe you want to just share what we have already, and then we'll complement that with our upcoming blog.
Definitely. Yeah, great call out. The blog will have all the recent feature releases and kind of like highlight those and help you be aware of like how to handle OAuth conversions, things like that. We do have a trial user guide, which kind of helps you ramp up on app governance. Our documentation will be updated once all of these features go live tomorrow. And so this will change, but you can go to, like, if you click learn more within the app governance portal, or just go to the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps documentation. The app governance node is under the how-to guides, and you can navigate to the trial user guide directly to get information on how to get started. Again, this documentation will change within the next couple of days according to our new feature release.
Perfect. Another scoping question. Can you scope the access to app governance to a group of admins and limit their visibility only to their business units apps?
So the question is, so currently app governance is scoped to admins based on AAD roles, not RBAC roles. And so you can scope it based on those roles by assigning the correct role to an admin. I am not sure whether you can scope that based on business unit. Andrew, do you know more about that?
No, we cannot. To your point, so there are certain admin roles, and again, if you go to online documentation, we clearly spell out like what each role would be able to do, but that is as far as you can do.
But would love to hear more on what the use case is and why you would want that capability. And we're happy to take that feedback. Okay, let's see what else we got. I know we're coming up on time. These are some awesome questions, so thanks everyone for the awesome participation. Okay, so we answered the business unit question. Can we see the user activity on these apps? I'm hoping that these apps are discovered automatically once they are provisioned, correct? Can we see user activity with OAuth applications in AppG? I think is the question.
So if the app is authenticating through a user, yes. So what I mean by that, let me go through an example. So if the permission that an app is using, I'm just trying to find a good example. So if the permission that an app is using, let's just say it's using mail.readWrite, you can see that the permission is delegated. So it means that the permission is on the user level, not at the app level. So that means that the app has to authenticate through the user to use that permission. So you would then be able to see kind of the data usage for this app through a user level permission, if that makes sense. So the app is accessing that user's data. If the user is accessing the data directly, like I am logging into my account and accessing data, it won't capture that. But at Microsoft Defender for cloud apps covers more of that user-specific data. App governance specifically more so focuses on the app, hence why we fall within that app-to-app pillar within Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. And we would only capture user access through an app.
That's a great call out, Wendy. So, and good clarification. So just to reiterate, for all of the connected applications that you have via API, then you're going to want to leverage the activity log. You'll see it in the node under the Cloud Apps bar, and that'll show you all of that user activity that Wendy was just talking about. Great questions. Just going to keep going here. Maybe we'll take one more and then let's close out. Is there any way that we can revoke or disable some of the permissions versus the entire application?
Within app governance, it's just on the application basis. There should be some capability within Azure AD to do that. For example, with line of business apps, you can control that yourself. For third-party apps, you'd probably have to reach out to the vendor directly to change the permissions, but that would be more on the Azure AD side.
Great. And with that, I think
I can take this last question. How long does the onboarding process take? Also, when app governance is provisioned, will it effectively be in read-only mode, or will it be performing actions out of the box? So after you, it disappeared, but after you opt in to app governance, it will take around maximum 10 hours for all the insights to load within the app governance node, and like all your insights, like this page, to be viewable and for you to be able to see like incidents, how many apps you have, things like that. There's no further configuration action you'd have to take other than opting in. And then the capabilities like the predefined policies and the threat detections that I went over earlier, that would come out of the box. You can also create your own user-defined policies, which obviously wouldn't come out of the box, but you can create those yourselves. And then all these insights would populate on their own based on the apps, whether the apps that you have in your tenant are accessing sensitive data, or whether you have data usage in your tenant. So all of that would come would populate automatically.
Fabulous. And with that, I know we have some closing announcements that Jacqueline wanted to share. So thank you all so much for your time. This was a great Q&A session, and just thanks for leaning in. And Jacqueline, I will pass it back to you. I'll share my screen in the meantime.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks to Caroline, Greg, and Wendy for today's webinar and for helping to answer all of the many questions that came in. Such a great active audience. Most of all, as always, thanks to all of our attendees for being such an active part of our community and for joining us today. I'd like to remind the listeners that the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements is to join our public community at aka.ms/securitycommunity. Today's recording and slides will be made available at aka.ms/securitycommunity under the video and webinar recording section. In case we missed your question today as well, or if you have additional questions afterwards, you can ask them on our Microsoft 365 Defender forum at aka.ms/m365DTC. Lastly, we always love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars. So please take a minute to submit your webinar feedback at aka.ms/security-webinar-feedback. Thank you all again for being with us today, and we hope to see you next time. Goodbye.